Welcome to Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast. These are the stories of those who have received, given, and who are waiting for the gift of life, organ transplantation. Now here's your host and heart and kidney recipient, BJ Odom.
Welcome to the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast, where we explore the extraordinary world of organ transplantation. I'm your host, BJ Odom. Each week we share inspiring stories and we introduce you to remarkable individuals that share their very own transplant stories. Now be sure to support us by going and leaving a 5-star review and subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Have a transplant story you'd like to share? We would love to hear it and get it on the podcast. Just send us an email, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to connect with us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. Welcome to episode 44. You may remember this week's guest from episode 37 as she shared her very own transplant story with a kidney transplant. And with all of that, it led her to her current occupation. Dawn is currently at CBH Care Wellness and Support Center as a rapid implementation specialist clinician with a LCSW in social work. With all that in mind, we decided to ask Dawn back for another episode, this time to work as a social worker, as she shares her experience and knowledge with us and, tries to help us give some tips for transplant patients and their families. Also, those waiting for organ transplantation or with other chronic illnesses, as she tries to explain how self-care is so important. We'll talk to Dawn coming up next. So you may remember Dawn from episode 37. We have her in the studio today, and we're talking about, things you can do for your self-care with mental health. And appreciate you because actually you said on episode 37, if I remember right, you got into mental health because of your transplant and wanting to help people, right?
That is correct. I wanted to do something to help people in the community, and I thought mental health was a good thing to do. Since somebody saved my life with a transplant, I wanted to do something to help other people.
Awesome. And today we're going to talk about that self-care because it is very important with us people that, are coping with transplants.
All right.
So I'm going to let you take the floor and talk about whatever you want to talk about today, young lady.
Thanks, BJ. First, I would like to give a little bit of an introduction. First thing I want to tell you is, or basically ask our people out there, have you seen those shirts and those T-shirts and those hats that say, keep calm and carry on? Yeah, okay. Well, that's a lot harder to do when you're either waiting for a transplant or you are getting a transplant, or when you have one at any stage of your transplant, or you're a caregiver for somebody with the chronic illness where they need a transplant, and it could also involve caregiving for anybody else with any other kind of chronic illness. Because we know in the transplant world, sometimes we're faced with other illnesses on top of the fact that we need a transplant.
Oh, yeah.
So keep calm and carry on isn't exactly easy, or let's just say you can't always do it. It's just not going to happen. So here I'm going to tell you some other ways or things you can do that might help you a little bit more, at least with the carry on part.
All right. I am ready because I think there are days that I definitely need to hear what you're about to talk about.
Yeah, we all struggle with that. And even if you're not a patient, you still sometimes struggle with that. Everybody out there, especially in the world today, has a lot of trouble, at least at some point, with keep calm and carry on.
Now, see, I might get some free therapy here today during today's podcast because with me being 22 years out, every once in a while, because 22 years with a heart is, a good amount of time. And sometimes the back of my head starts telling me, well, BJ, you're 22 years out. You had a kidney in 2015. This ride isn't going to last forever. And I will get into a day or two where I'm in just a funk because I'm going, I guess I'm waiting for that next shoe to fall. And then, I try to, I dig myself out and, get out of that mode. But I do find myself every now and again falling in to that trap.
Yeah, and there are people that'll say, oh, don't think like that. Don't worry about that. People who don't understand, who are not in the transplant world. I'm out with my kidney. It'll be, it's 24 years. It'll be 25 this September. And yes, I'm thrilled, but I say to my husband, Thomas, what am I going to do when I someday, or if I someday lose this kidney? He says, oh, don't think about that. Or my doctor says, don't think about that. Guess what? Little bit hard not to. Little bit hard not to.
No kidding.
Sorry, it sneaks in there like a little worm.
Yeah, it's exactly right.
Sometimes it just does. It just does. We're all prone to that.
Now, can you help people to dig out of that? I mean, if someone's in that mood where, because, you got your highs and your lows. Let's say I'm in a low today. How do I bring myself out of that low and get back into, the happy spirit that I am?
Okay. Well, one of the things, and I noticed a definite positive thing about you and myself and some people out there is one of the things is having a sense of humor. Sometimes, we got to find something to laugh at, or like something that I do is finding gratefulness in something. Mm-hmm. Finding some gratefulness in some small things or big things, not just our transplant, something else, go out, take a walk, notice the small things out there, the crazy dogs or squirrels or whatever running around, or something your kids did. Try to think of something that you're thankful for besides the transplant, even if it's something the transplant gave you ultimately, or watch a funny movie or something to distract yourself. Get your mind back out of that dark. But sometimes we can't. So sometimes the best we can do is let it go. Take some deep breaths and just, let it go. Allow ourselves to think for a minute, because I think it's normal. I think feeling overwhelmed is normal. Feeling scared is normal. Feeling even depressed at times is normal. That's something to remember. Sometimes we have to allow ourselves to feel that and then move on.
Okay, because like I said, there are days, that I have, my dark days. But at least I feel fortunate enough to say that usually a day, 2 days at the most, and I've dug my way back out again.
That's just it. Because we got to acknowledge that those days are real, that we're going to have them. And I think that they're normal. What we try to do as people in general is try to say, oh, this isn't normal. This is no good. I can't do this. I'm not allowed to have these feelings. I got to be strong. And if you have a family like you do and I do and most of us do, you say, I've got to be strong. I can't be this way. Mm-hmm. Who says that? Who made that rule? Who said that? Who said that? I'm not allowed to be anxious. I'm not allowed to be worried. I got to be strong for my family. I got to be strong for myself. I can't be anxious. I can't be depressed. And then what do? As soon as we say that to ourselves, we are.
Very, very true.
I can't. I'm not. What does that sound like? We are. So let it be. It's okay. I'm going to tell everybody out there, it is okay sometimes to have a day or two, or sometimes to have anxiety and feel overwhelmed. And sometimes, to just say, okay, I need a few hours in bed. It's okay. But after that, try to do something else. Sometimes we got to rest. Sometimes we got to relax. And sometimes we got to listen to our body. That's a big one.
Yes.
If your body's telling you to sit. Something we don't do. We don't listen to our body. I found that is very helpful. And we also don't seek help enough. One of the things that I found, both in mental and physical health, we can be stubborn, especially when we're feeling that way. Oh no, it'll go away. Oh no, we're always trying to push away the sickness. No, guess what? Don't work like that. Especially with us as transplant patients or those waiting. Sorry, can't push it away. Get help.
Yeah.
So whether it's physical or mental.
And, of course, there's people like you that do this on a daily basis. And then there are those that are saying, well, where do I go or what do I do? Maybe you're from a small town. But there's so many avenues now. Even, what is it? There's a couple online where you can, do a video call and get mental
Oh,
health
yeah.
counseling. And so,
Yeah.
and don't be
So,
ashamed. Don't be ashamed. Because when people say, oh, I'm so ashamed that I'm here talking to you today. They should not
that's
be
why I say it's
ashamed.
normal. That's why I say it's normal. Don't be ashamed. It's okay. Strong people cry. I have to say that strong people cry. In fact, it's the stronger people who cry and go and get help. It's not a weakness. People forsake it in weakness, and particularly when we're men. I hate to say that, but it's still gender true. That men will say, I can't cry. Society says, don't cry. Be strong. No, get help.
and if you are crying and you are a transplant patient, you can do like me. We'll be watching a movie and I'll be over there crying like a little baby, and my wife will look at me and go, what are you doing? I go, it's the meds, dear. It's the meds. I'm crying because it's the meds.
Yeah, let me address that. So there are meds. We know that there are meds that actually cause mood swings. How about that one? So we know that as transplant patients and even in pre-transplant, particularly one, prednisone. Oh boy, that's always fun. So it can cause mood swings. Like, hey, yeah, I'm going to run around the block today and I'm going to eat about 16 plates of food, or it can cause you to just cry or want to stay in bed. So that's just one. But I do want to mention that anyway, because side effects of meds can be a very dreary situation at times. Like those feelings we were talking about before BJ and I were talking about. What, meds? Who, me? Well, yeah. Anywhere from pre-transplant to post-transplant and everywhere in between, yes, meds are a daily regimen. Treatments are a daily regimen. So I want to mention that. I think I'll mention that as self-care, because a couple of other things. First of all, if your doctor says take them, take them. But second of all, in regards to side effects, advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to tell your doctors that you have side effects that you can't tolerate. And also, don't wait for your next appointment to call them. If you are taking your medication and they start to make you feel like you cannot get out of bed, or bad headaches, or throwing up your guts, or anything that is really, shakiness, anything that is intolerable, call your transplant team. If you're pre-transplant, call your doctor, or anybody else for that matter. Don't wait till your next appointment. A lot of people say, I don't have an appointment yet. Call them anyway. That's what they get paid for.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I tell my patients.
My transplant team and my coordinator is on speed dial.
There you go. Yeah. Call the people that you need. And that includes for mental health. Reach out, call people if you need them. That's what we all get paid. That's what people who are professionals get paid for. That's what I get paid for in mental health. You know what? You're not bothering us. You're not bothering your doctor. You're not bothering your psychiatrist. Doesn't matter. I mean, if you need one. So let me mention a couple of resources that I know for mental health. If you are feeling really bad, I mean, some people even get to the point of, oh my God, I don't know if I want my life anymore, even if you have a transplant. So I want to say that sometimes that does happen. Not all of us are always happy. Not all of us are always positive, because sometimes side effects to meds or other situations in our lives might cause us to feel that way. Or some people are prone to depression. If somebody is having thoughts of suicide, there is the national number 988. But there are a couple of online services, things like BetterHelp, that you can Google for online therapy. You can also go to www.psychologytoday, and that will give you a listing of therapists and doctors basically across the country. That's a big resource that I use where I work. So that's just a couple of things that you can use. And you can also, Google and read articles, but be careful with Google. Even if you have a transplant, Dr. Google is not that smart. Talk to your doctors. You're laughing probably because you use Dr. Google. So do I.
Now,
when we get worried, we tend to do it.
Now, let me ask you a question.
Everybody does it.
Now, let me ask you a question. and maybe you can help people with this too, because I know even in medical situations sometimes, because with transplant patients, you know, we have a lot of money that we spend for our meds. We have a lot of money we,
Right.
you know, spend for our doctor's appointments and our therapies and things like that. If you are like, you know, struggling with funds, are there, you know, what are some of the ways you might be able to get some, there's got to be programs out there for mental health, right?
Okay, so a lot of people, by the time they get to going on a transplant, maybe on Medicare or Medicaid, those do cover medications. But one of the things that you can do that you can check out if you don't have, a lot of times if you have no money, or there's a certain cap of how much money you can have to get into the programs, but a lot of times the manufacturers, like Pfizer or whoever else is manufacturing your medication, first find out the manufacturer and then see if they have a program for people who don't have money or don't have enough money that you could apply for. It's a little bit of a hassle on paperwork, putting together like what you're spending basically, and putting together your income if you have one. But sending that to them, a lot of the manufacturers do have programs. There's also small amounts of funding that might be available through like almost like a scholarship. Basically, AAKP, American Association of Kidney Patients, has one. National Kidney, National Kidney Fund. Some of them have small amounts of funds for different things. I know for kidney, I don't know about for others. I don't know if like the American Heart Association does, you know, small funds for things like that. But I know that you could also, that a good place to check is definitely the manufacturers of the medications. Some manufacturers also for the diabetes medications also have those programs as well. So that's some places that you could probably find some help. I do know Medicaid covers a lot of them, and Medicare. However, one of the issues is that they ask that you use drugs or medications rather that are, what do they call them, the generics. Mm-hmm. So be a little careful, be a little mindful, talk to your doctors. If you need the prescription brand name or one that's not covered, talk to your doctors about writing notes or writing referrals to the insurance companies.
Yeah, because
a lot of times the doctors have no clue.
Sometimes I know like the hospitals also have some connections every now and again. You know, then they usually have counselors and things like that can sometimes
the hospital
help you.
Social workers too.
Yes.
Yeah, hook up with your hospital social worker. Unfortunately, that's not the type of social work that I do currently, but that's another good resource. Is the hospital social workers may know of them. Like I said, they may mention the companies like I did, like Pfizer and what's a couple of the other ones, but any of the other ones you can see. And you can actually just Google that online. Find the manufacturer of your medication, which usually is on the bottle or the box, and you could probably Google to see which medications they actually have programs for. Now a lot of them do, so
yeah,
that's one of the things I would recommend. But we spend a lot of money. We do. We spend a lot of money on treatments and a lot of money on therapies, and then there's excess therapies for other things that may go wrong.
And sometimes that can actually affect your mental health. You know, especially, you know, maybe some gentleman or even a lady has worked their entire life and they've kind of been the breadwinner of the family, and all of a sudden you need a transplant and you're sick, and that goes away, and that can really mess with your psyche also.
Yeah, and even if you're not the breadwinner, sometimes for women, even if they're just at home as full-time moms, now I got to get a transplant. How the heck am I going to take care of the kids? There's that one too. I saw a post today about that. I need a transplant, but I got 5 kids. How am I going to do that?
Yeah.
And go to work and do this and do that. So any of us could have that and suddenly fall into depression. I think the only thing we can do with that is really, take care of ourselves. Oh, I do want to mention some really big important thing that would help. Support groups. I find that support groups are huge. Not everybody likes groups, and I get that. Some people say, man, I don't like groups, or I don't want to talk in a group. Well, then don't talk in the group. Just join it.
And listen.
And listen. And listen. You don't have to talk. Many people are embarrassed. I like to talk, obviously, but not everybody does. So listen. You might get some helpful advice. I will say that on groups sometimes there isn't helpful advice and people are sharing some unuseful information. But the good thing about all of this is you go in the groups, people will listen, they understand what it's like to have a transplant or waiting for a transplant, no matter what organ.
Now, I remember when I was told that I was going to need a transplant, and that's the first thing that I did. I go, a transplant? Heart transplant? What is this even all about? And I luckily was doing radio at the time, and I got to, I reached out to some people, and I actually talked to a gentleman who had a heart transplant because I figured, let me talk to him. Let me get a little insight. And then he told me about a support group that he was part of, and I joined it. And in the early days, I got so much knowledge from that support group that I wasn't going in as blind as I was from the very beginning, because that's when your head really spins. When you first get that news,
exactly.
You're going to need a transplant.
It doesn't matter which organ it is as well, because I did the same thing. I went out and I found support groups. My local hospital had a couple of them, and and then I found some more. There was no online back then, and I'm sure just like 22 years ago, there wasn't like online stuff. But now there are multitudes of online support groups for different organs, for transplant, for advocating for organ donation. There is so much out there that that's almost mind-boggling. So how do you choose one?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? How do you choose one without, again, being like overwhelmed? Pick one. This is my thought on it. This is just my opinion. So pick one or two or three. Try them. If you don't like them, then go back and find more. Don't overwhelm yourself. You're overwhelmed enough.
True.
So when and here's the thing, when you're making decisions, pick a few to address a day. Don't make yourself overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed enough with our news, with what we know we have to do. So I think keeping our focus small in a day, so we give ourselves a chance to rest and absorb it, and writing things down really helps a lot with the anxiety of, oh my God, what am I going to do now? I have a task list that I like for, just for those days or any days, a limited task list I learned, and I've talked to some support group members that seem to like this as well. 3 things. Start with 3 things. I know many of us can now, probably get a lot more done than 3 things, but this is for people who are feeling overwhelmed. Make a list of 3 things. The first thing to do on your list should be easy. Maybe it's making a couple of phone calls and you're done for the day with that one. The second thing should be something, kind of medium, but not too hard. Make the third thing on your list to do a little harder. The thing that, you've been putting off, maybe a little challenge, and try to just do those things. However, if you get 2 out of 3 done, that's 2 out of 3 done. Give yourself credit. And then if you don't feel like doing more, you're done for the day. And this is because sometimes our brain can't handle more than that in the day. It's too overloaded with, I'm going to do this, I got to do this, what do I got to do, what do I got to do? No, then take some time to rest. Take some time to relax. Take some time to do something you enjoy. Take time to breathe, for that matter. It's a short list, but it actually is a good one for when you're not feeling like you could do much more. And then you could acknowledge that you did something and cross off your list. Our brain needs that. Our overwhelmed brain needs to acknowledge that we did something right.
That's good information there.
I find that even I do that sometimes, and I'll do it at work even. Okay, this, and this. Then if I do extra, even better, great. But if I don't, I'm not going to kick myself. We tend to want to have the productivity. Here's the thing. We tend to want to have the productivity when we're sick that we had when we weren't sick.
Yeah, and then every once in a while your brain will go, okay, I used to do all these things, and now it seems like I'm not even doing squat anymore.
Right. That's why the 3 things is good. least that day you did something. But the more important thing about that is giving yourself credit for the things you did do.
Okay.
I think that's a good one. I can't express, greater is advocating for yourself and talking to your team. I think, that's a big one no matter what. But another thing I would say is sometimes we criticize ourselves a lot, and it's important to be gentle with yourself in learning how to accept your quote new normal. That's a hard one.
Now,
we used to be able to do things faster and bigger and better.
Now, I've said this many times, and I talk to people who just find out maybe maybe they've been healthy their entire life, and they've lived life to the fullest, and all of a sudden they're hit with this brick wall that says, I need a heart transplant. In fact, I have a friend right now that is going through this very same thing. He's always been healthy, he's always been active, and now he finds out he needs a heart transplant. Where in my case, I was sick from birth and was, never really a strong person, never really able to do a lot of running in my life and doing a lot of the things that normal little boys and girls do, because I just didn't have the energy or the stamina to do it. And so I think when I got hit with some of my medical problems, being from birth sick, that it actually helped me in life than rather someone that's, been active all their life and now boom, oh man, I'm told I'm not even supposed to, go for a walk or something. I gotta, just take it easy till I get this transplant. And I can only imagine how hard that is for people.
I would imagine that's very hard. I would think even though I wasn't sick from birth or as a child, it was still a lot. It was now half of my life that I've known kidney disease. So, which in my early 20s, I don't think I had normal life anyway for ever. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't start out with a career. I didn't start out working. I didn't start out married. I didn't start out with a normal life. It hit me up early enough that I didn't have that. It went right into my early work life. So, when you're hit later, or people I met that are even starting dialysis at say, I don't know, at my age 50 or 60 and saying, oh, I'm starting dialysis and I got to wait now maybe 13 years by the time I get a transplant. Oh my God, they're doing that.
Yes.
So that, I'm sure that's a very hard thing for people out there, and, and a hard thing to deal with. So what do you do? I mean, I talk to people in my job, clients that have lost productivity due to, many illnesses, whether it's a heart attack or needing a transplant or just about any kind of chronic illness that they're now hit with. The one thing I say is, you know what? It's not always forever that you won't be able to do these things. You might have to do them slowly or differently than you did before, but it doesn't mean you won't be able to do them at all. That this is temporary, involving some kind of healing or some kind of medical intervention, whether it's transplant or medication or whatever it is, speaking to people who have other illnesses as well. Sometimes you just need to do some steps to get there in order to adjust. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, you actually will. The likelihood is that you actually will. But take the steps that you need so that things can get better. It doesn't mean that you cannot.
Now, another question I was going to ask you about, and I know that sometimes I even myself probably sometimes forget all of the care that my caregiver has given me. My wife, has been there by my side, and I know she's had to change her lifestyle sometimes. She's had to skip doing things that she would probably do, if she wasn't worried about a husband who was sick. Caregivers, very important that you do some self-care also, because if you're the caregiver and you go down, what's going to happen to the person you're caring for? And so maybe we can touch on that subject if you have some insight for caregivers.
Well, BJ, I do. I had to take care of my mom for a while in her last year of life. Even though she was in and out of hospitals and nursing home, I volunteered to go there and be a caregiver. And when I was first transplanted, I helped my grandfather in being a caregiver for my grandmother. I think I was out of my mind. No, I did it out of love while I was healing from transplant. But so any event, whoever you're caring for, it's a stressful job. I want to say this, whether it's your kid, your husband, your spouse, your mother, your grandmother, whoever it is, I think caregiving is one of the most stressful jobs that there is. Because the breaks are the breaks you decide to take. There's no real breaks. There's no unions. There's no physical paycheck, but you do it because you love somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But it is. It's one of the hardest jobs that there is because, like you said, your wife had to make sacrifices, her time and her life. I think there's a thing that happens sometimes. The person who is being cared for may feel a little guilty because, say, their caregiver partner, is giving up all this, and that could cause a little trigger of, sadness, depression, in the person being cared for. So I think it's important, if the person being cared for can talk and is able to speak about their feelings, that they have a conversation. Communication is key. I was talking to somebody recently about caregiving, and in one of the groups that I'm in, and that's one of the things we were talking about. Communication is one of the biggest things that people have to use for a couple of reasons. One is sometimes the caregiver wants to do everything for you. So here's a big dilemma. Sometimes the person being cared for can do some things for themselves that they don't need the caregiver to do. Like, say, maybe get a glass of water or do, whatever it is, whatever they're capable of doing. But your caregiver might want to do everything for you just because they love you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's important is for the caregiver to ask the person they're caring for, what do you need? What is it I can do for you? And have a discussion about what they're able to do for themselves. Because you don't want to totally take the independence away from the person that you're caring for when they can do certain things for themselves to help them to not feel bad, which also might help them to not feel, I'm going to say, as grumpy toward you when you're giving caregiving. Maybe you're doing something they don't need.
Uh-huh.
It happens. My husband and I have had that when I've been in the hospital. No, I can do this. I can open that wrapper. Sorry. Yes, I've got pneumonia, but no, I can open this fork wrapper, I can feed myself. So, sometimes we can do things ourselves. It gives us independence, makes us feel a little bit better, do some stuff. Also gives the caregiver a slight break, something they don't have to do.
Well, I know when my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer and had to go through all that, and I was on the other side of the bed after being a child, as a sick child, as a sick adult, as a transplant patient, going through all the things that I went through all those years in my life. Now, all of a sudden, I am on the other side of the bed. That was probably watching her and being with her and caring for her during her breast cancer was probably more taxing for me than was the heart transplant for myself.
Yeah. It's greater. Watching somebody that you love is greater than, in a way, than doing it yourself. When you're doing it yourself, I don't think that kind of thought is there. I think I was looking at that, comparing myself to my husband a little bit. I was sort of analyzing it, if you will, that when I'm sick, I just do what I got to get better.
Mm-hmm.
I do what the doctor tells me. If I'm going to sleep 6 hours, I'm going to sleep 6 hours. I'm not going to really be thinking about my husband. I'm not. So, I mean, I do, but I don't. Our goal is to get better. We're not always conscious enough to be thinking about much when we're that sick, really. But our caregiver is the one that is worrying about us and worrying about themselves and worrying about anybody else they got to take care of, the kids or the house or whatever else.
Yeah, that's
so
it's like when my wife went in for one of her surgeries. She was all nervous and worried, which is expected. And I go, but at
Oh, yeah.
least, dear, for the next, day, you're going to get to sleep and be all relaxed. And I'm going to be out here pulling my hair out. And I go, so I know what you felt like all those years, because this is a whole lot tougher than, being on that side of the bed.
And I think watching somebody, whether it's cancer or transplant or anything, with the thought that you would lose them, I think that's a greater stress mentally, in a sense, with somebody you love than, when it gets to be that severe, then, with the chances of that, we know that with cancers, with the heart, with a lot of illnesses. And I think that stressor right there is probably the most overwhelming, biggest one, is the chance that you could lose somebody that you love. So you're doing everything you could possibly do to want to help them.
Mm-hmm. And like I said,
I don't know.
Yeah, because you worry about someone much more than when I'm in the hospital. Yeah, I worry, how things are going to turn out, but I don't it's not. I don't know. It's hard to explain and put into words, but
It's not the same.
yeah,
it's not the same.
It's a totally different experience, a totally different worrying, and I think it's a whole lot tougher. Like I said, on the other side of the bed. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think if it's anybody who cares about anybody else, for that matter, or cares about people, and and has a heart, and has some, not a transplant, a heart inside that they care, they're going to care more for that person than they are at that time for themselves. I think that's it, because that's what we do. We love that person more than ourselves, especially at that time. I think, especially if they've also cared for us. It's a unique feeling, one I wish people didn't have to go through. But yeah, it's one of the toughest, hardest things. So how do you stay together? How do you keep yourself together as a caregiver? Well, again, I want to mention that sometimes there are support groups for that. That's one thing. The other thing is keep in contact with the person that you're caring for. Keep in contact with their team. Maybe organize, some online meetings with their coordinators, and both you and the person who is ill. Sometimes that helps. My dad does that in caring for his wife who has cancer. They do online chats with her doctors, and they do online chats with his doctors. So sometimes that might be helpful, to coordinate care. It's important to take a break if you can. Sometimes the person might be taking a nap that you're caring for, or something. You're worried something's going to happen to them. But even if it's 5 minutes, walk out of the room, walk around the house. Have a cup of coffee, have a cup of tea, whatever. Walk away 5 minutes. That 5 minutes is gold. Even if you do it every few hours. Because like I said, that other person, they are going to sleep at some point, hopefully. Or, and they're the ones that could get the meds for it. But, well, not necessarily. I'm going to correct myself on that, because sometimes the caregiver who needs to sleep also is having a truckload of trouble sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say that if the person who's the caregiver needs to either reach out to somebody for medication to help with sleeping, or they need to find a therapist themselves, or anything, it's important to do so. Get help for yourself, because like you said, you can't be a good caregiver unless you're, taking care of yourself. So the important thing is to sleep, to eat, to try to eat healthy, maybe healthy snacks if you can't have time to make full meals, because I hear caregivers say, well, I can't cook for myself. I can't make me a meal. I got to make it for them. I got to do that. Then I got to feed the kids and blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. You know what? Keep a baggie in the fridge with healthy snacks. If you like fruit or vegetables, cut up ahead of time. You're already making stuff for that other person. Cut up a few things for yourself to snack on. Or make a smoothie. Throw it in the blender. So fine, you don't need a full meal, but do something. You need nutrition. Mm-hmm. You can't run your car without gas. You can't use your phone without charging it. Your body is the car and the phone. Think about it. That's what I tell people. You can't. So don't let your batteries run out. So that's important. Basic things, eating, sleeping, even exercise if you can. If you can't get out of the house because you're caring for the person, like I said, walk around the house 5 minutes. Whatever it is, do something. And you know what? I think your person you're caring for will do better if you're doing better. I think that's, definitely true.
Yes, ma'am.
And, talk to somebody else sometimes about if you're feeling negatively, find, like I said, besides support groups, maybe a friend or a family member. Don't be afraid to talk to other people about how you're feeling, because guess what? There's other caregivers out there. Guess what? There's other sick people out there. And somebody out there is going to understand how you're feeling. This way your anger isn't brought to the person you're caring for. We don't mean to do it, but sometimes we're caring for somebody and we get a little angry. Why don't you eat? Why don't you do this? How come you're not drinking water? It's easy to do that, not because we're mad at them, but because we're human and we care and we don't want anything to happen to them.
Well, that's like, too, when something goes on with my wife, because she's always harping, you need to call your doctor. You need to call your doctor. You need to call your transplant team. So whenever, she's having a problem, I'm like, you know what? You're the one that's always belly aching at me and telling me that I need to, call my doctor. Well, guess what? You need to be calling your doctor to figure out what's going on.
Right. So, it's very common, especially among couples.
Yes.
So, and especially as people get older. Yeah, you call your heart specialist. No, you call your doctor. There is that. So maybe finding another way to pull off steam. And sometimes it's a good idea, maybe tell them once or tell them, okay, refer to your list, write it down. Have people write it down sometimes because we forget. I think writing things down is key. Speaking of which, write things down when you go to a doctor or write things down when you go to her doctor.
Now, I will tell you this, as far as myself and my wife, we are entirely different. When I found out I was going to need a heart transplant, I said, okay, I need a heart transplant. And, I was a little worried about it. And I wanted to talk to some other people that had a transplant. But as far as trying to get to know everything I could possibly get to know about a heart transplant, I didn't do that. I said, the less I know, the better I'm going to feel going into this heart transplant. Okay. And where my wife was the total opposite. When she was sick with her kid, she wanted to know everything, anything. And then she was basically writing a book. And every time she goes to the doctor, she has a whole list of questions where I just go, here's how I'm feeling. This is what's going on. And what do you got to say? What should I be doing? And she's got she's got a whole book of questions for him, maybe it's good because she usually has a little, some little notes, even when she sees my doctor. Well, we need to ask him this, need to ask him that. I go, well, whatever. Yeah. Okay. We can ask him that.
The basic things we got to do when we go to the doctor, make sure we write down, okay, I got to get my refills for this, this, and this, because we know as transplant patients, not everything might refill at the same time. Things like that, the basic questions. But if you have a question and a question crosses your mind, even if you're not looking for everything, then, write it down and bring it to your doctor. And the reason I say write it down is because we all know that the insurance policies are making the doctors kick us out in 15 minutes. We all know that that's how medicine is practiced right now. It's practice of medicine. Let's see how fast we can get you out of the office.
I know some of those old-fashioned doctors are they're going crazy with those rules because they're used to, sitting down and spending as much time as they need to with each and every patient.
Oh, yeah. So, but they can't anymore. It's terrible. And in psychiatry, the psychiatrists are even doing that, which is really horrible because it's a different animal, psychiatry. But yeah, so we know that that's how they're practicing it now. Thanks to the insurance companies and all the new rules. So write down, if you do have a question, I would say that the patients and caregivers, write it down, because you're only going to get about 15 to 20 minutes if you're lucky to be able to have them answer, and make sure your questions are answered before you leave the office. Because what happens is we leave the office and we go, oh, I wish I would have asked them that.
I don't know how many times I've done that.
Man,
see, that's one thing. My wife has everything written down. I'm like, oh, damn, I knew I wanted to ask him something else.
Well, this is what I do. I put it on my phone. I don't have notes and bond notes anymore. I used to bring notebooks. Well, I didn't have a cell phone back then. It was 20-something years ago, so I brought notebooks. But you know what? I could hear my cell phone, and I don't overwhelm myself. A few questions. And my husband will be like, what was it you wanted to ask the doctor? I'm like, wait, I'll check my phone, because now I don't remember. I let it go, and I just put 2 or 3 things in my phone, because I know I'm not going to have a lot of time there. But, my main thing is make sure I get all my meds filled, find out when the next appointment is. But, now that I'm out a long time. But you know what? People who are doing that, if they have a lot of questions, bring them to your team, especially when you're first transplanted. A lot of people have a lot more questions or issues with their meds. Yes, bring those questions to the doctor. You can't go on. And if you're doing Dr. Google, I have a thing about Dr. Google, because not everything you find on Google or WebMD is true.
I think that's
or it can be misleading.
And I think that's why I avoid that as much as possible, really,
Good.
Because, you can work yourself up over nothing, or you can really have something too, though, yes.
Yes, you can look up a hangnail on your finger and think you're going to lose the finger, okay? So, yes. So, first of all, if you can avoid the Google stuff, do it. But I know some people, they can't help themselves. However, if you find a question about something on Google, don't insist in your mind that is correct. Write it down and go to your doctor with it and say, hey, don't 20 question them, but if you see something that is glaring that you saw or heard in a support group, either way, and you want to bring it to your doctor or your team and say, hey, I heard this. What do you think? For example, I've heard people say, well, can I take marijuana for pain if I got a transplant? I'm not going to address that question. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not your team. So I won't address that on the podcast. But ask your doctor.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say. Ask your doctor. Whatever you're taking, and that's a big one, whatever you're taking, it's always good to know for the caregivers to ask this. Whatever you're giving the person you're caring for, be careful of things over the counter. And be careful with other meds or their conditions. Always, always be sure to ask the team, no matter what, whether you're the caregiver or you're the person with the illness, because not all of the meds a person may take may be agreeable, and not always will our conditions be agreeable to certain medications that are over the counter.
Well, that's like a lot of, a lot of people now are like into, this vitamin or this supplement and things like that. And they will say, oh man, you really need to take this. And before I do any of that, I think this is a wise word to tell any transplant patient or anybody, even with any critical illness at all, is say, okay, that sounds like that might be good for me. But before you try it or before you take it, pick up your phone, call your transplant coordinator, say, hey, such and such said this might be good. What do you think? And they'll either say, oh man, you don't want to take that. That'll totally mess up your anti-rejection drugs. Or they, may say, oh, that could really help. Yeah, if you would like to take that, take that. But yeah, always ask. I would say that would be one of the number one things to do is if you're going to start something.
Right, that's big self-care.
Yeah, if you're going to
big self-care. Number one.
Yeah, if you're going to start doing something else that's not on the regiment, ask your team.
Yeah, it's not I'm for or against it. Just like talk to your team.
Yep.
It may or may not be a good thing. Not everybody can tolerate things that whether they're legal or not. Drinking as well. Yeah, alcohol is legal. Great, fantastic. Not everybody can take that alcohol with their medication. Might make them feel dizzy or pass out. No, you don't want to do that. I'm sure you don't want to do that.
I just remember my doctors telling me that it would be all right to have one drink a day. And then I would always say, well, can I just save it up for a couple months and have like 30 in one day? No, that's not the way it works. That's not the way it works. You can have one a day.
Right, exactly. That's a good one. I like that. But no, it don't work that way. Anybody who's listening, don't work that way. Also, cold medicines. Be really careful. Just because they say they might be good, we all watch the TV, watch some TV with some ads, that tell us, oh, this is good for cough and cold and this and this. Be very, very, very careful. Talk to your team.
Oh, yeah.
For example, with a kidney, I can't take NSAIDs, which are anti-inflammatory medications like Advil and Advil and things like that. I can't take them because I have a kidney transplant. People with liver transplants might not be able to take Tylenol, but they'll take an Advil because some medications affect the liver, some affect the heart, some affect the blood pressure. You got to be careful with cold medicines.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, no matter what it is, I don't care if it's a supplement, something that's over the counter that all your friends take. If you've got a transplant, check with your transplant team. Yeah. I cannot believe we're almost 50 minutes into this podcast today. And so I know we're running short on time, but you probably, because I know you're kind of like my wife. You are prepared, and I started throwing curveball questions at you and messing up the whole plan you probably had laid out. But is there anything key and important that this dummy skipped over because he's changed the subject all of a sudden on you? This is your time. I'm going to be quiet. Tell me what you want me to hear.
Well, one of the things that I want to mention is if you're a transplant patient, sometimes once you feel better, volunteering and the need to give back sometimes is very helpful. And share your story can be very helpful because the more you share your story, people will listen, and it's very rewarding for you and others. Maybe you might want to consider being on the Gift of Life podcast with BJ Odom. Who knows?
And actually, as a transplant patient, this has helped me. I mean, it's helped me emotionally, and it's just helped me learn about more different organs and what they go through. And so, yes, I'm right there with you. Sharing your story is very important, and I try and do that every time I can.
Yeah, I mean, and another thing, a quick thing I'd say is mindfulness. Listen to your body. Be mindful of what you're doing. Be mindful of where you are in the moment in order to slow down that racing brain. We all have it. Some days we have it. So you know what? Look around you and see what you can enjoy. Use your 5 senses. Now that, especially if you're feeling better on a good day, think about what can I enjoy? What can I hear? What can I taste? What can I smell? All of them, my feet are planted on the ground. Just, just ground yourself for a minute. What is around me? Or am I enjoying this good cup of coffee with this, beautiful color and beautiful taste? Just ground yourself a minute. Sometimes that really helps. I guess, that was one of the things that I was thinking that I missed. Because sometimes it just helps to be in the moment, whether it's, with your kids, whether it's enjoying music, whatever it is. If our brains go too far into the future or start thinking too much about the past or what we've got to do tomorrow, we lose the presence of the moment. So therefore, we lose what we've gotten from our gift of life is to just race all over the place. Enjoy it. Enjoy the moment that you have because it's every moment that counts.
We want to thank Dawn so much for sharing some of her experience in social work and as a kidney transplant recipient. Be sure to join us next week for a new heartfelt episode, Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. If you have a transplant story, email us, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, and don't forget to like and share this episode. And we would appreciate that 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. If you're looking for another podcast with, 2 old radio guys, one being myself and my old radio partner, Bill Stevens, BJ and Bill the Podcast, all on the Podcast Playground Network, and we want to thank them so much. Thank you to Gentry and Jay for helping us spread the word here on Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. Until next time, I'm BJ Odom. Thank you so much for being a part of our journey, and remind us all to appreciate each and every day and to treasure the extraordinary gift of life.